Hi there, this is Doug Zanes. Welcome to my weekly show. Thank you for listening. Today I want to talk a little bit about, quite honestly, the Bruce Jenner car accident that recently took place in California on the Pacific Coast Highway. Um, that particular accident, as I've read about it, has raised a lot of issues that, quite honestly, come up with accidents in general. And so, I figure it's a good example to discuss a little bit, in order to understand kind of the ins and outs that can come up in car accidents, because it can get very complicated. But in that particular case, and this is all based off of what I've read, just so it's clear to everybody, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that particular accident. I don't represent, or my firm doesn't represent anybody involved in that accident. So this is based off of what I've read, in the media about the accident. But my understanding of the accident is it took place on, the Pacific Coast Highway in Southern California. And, Mr. Jenner was driving a big vehicle, if I recall correctly, a Cadillac Escalade. And it was actually pulling a trailer that had, a small, kind of all-terrain vehicle on the back that he had picked up. And I think that's important because, if anybody has driven an SUV or a truck that's pulling a trailer and has all that extra weight behind it, that's certainly something you have to factor into your driving, because you cannot stop nearly as quickly if you're towing something. The heavier, I think, the item that you're towing, the more of a challenge it is. And that's important because you have to understand that any driver has a duty to drive at a speed that allows them to avoid a collision. That's a statute that we have in Arizona. That's a statute that California has, and I would guess that every state has a similar statute. And really what the statute is saying is that as a driver, as you look at the vehicles in front of you, you have to keep enough distance between the front of your vehicle and the rear end of the vehicle in front of you in order to safely stop if something were to happen. If that vehicle just slams on the brakes all of a sudden, you've got to have enough distance in between you and the vehicle in front of you to then be able to hit your brakes and come to a stop without hitting them, which most people don't do, quite honestly. I mean, you can drive around traffic wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this from, and you'll see most people stay pretty close to the vehicle in front of them, which, quite honestly, to drive safely, you should not do. And when you're driving and you say to yourself, okay, consciously, how much distance do I need between me and the driver in front of me? You have to factor in things like, am I pulling a trailer, that has something heavy on it? What kind of vehicle am I driving? If you're in a U-Haul, for example, that you rent, U-Hauls, because of their size and weight, big trucks take significantly more distance in order to safely stop. And I can tell you, for example, I've talked to truck drivers who drive 18-wheelers or big box trucks who say one of the most annoying things to them as a driver is when vehicles pull in front of them, in between them and the vehicle that's in front of them. Because as a commercial driver, what they intentionally do is that they leave that space in between them and the vehicle in front of them that will allow them to stop in time. If that vehicle somehow slams on their brakes for, an animal that jumps out into the road, a person, an object, another vehicle slamming on their brakes, whatever it may be. And then, so they're driving along and they have that space in between them and the vehicle in front of them, and then suddenly a vehicle from the lane next to them pulls in between them. Because there's space there. And now they've got to hit their brakes and slow down and put that same distance between them and that car that just pulled into that space. And it's quite honestly, I don't think other drivers actually realize that's why that 10 car length space or 15 car length space is between that big truck and the car in front of them. They just think, oh, it's a space and I can pull in, there's plenty of room for me, and isn't that nice? Where, when you try to get other drivers to let you in, they don't want to let you in. But that's why that space is there. But anyways, you as a driver have a duty to have enough space in between you and the car in front of you to stop without running into them. How do we know Bruce Jenner did not do that? Well, it's easy. We know he didn't do that because he ran into the back of the car that was in front of him. I mean, it's simple. It's not a complicated formula. If you have enough space to safely stop when that vehicle in front of you stops, you don't hit them. So we know he violated that traffic violation, which is a civil traffic violation everywhere that I know of. It's not a criminal violation. It's a civil traffic violation where you end up having to pay a fine. Now, one of the things that's come up in the California case, and this varies from state to state, but California apparently, from what I've read, has a criminal statute that says if you violate a civil traffic violation and cause an accident, and somebody is killed in that accident, you can be charged with, I believe it's a misdemeanor, negligent homicide charge. So my understanding is it's not a felony, but it's a serious charge. It's a misdemeanor negligent homicide charge, which fits this particular accident, because if you've read about it, Mr. Jenner slammed on his brakes, didn't have enough room in between him and the vehicle in front of him, which I believe was a white Lexus, slammed on his brakes and turned his vehicle to either the left or the right in order to avoid hitting that vehicle. But he wasn't able to avoid it because, he had the extra weight from the trailer, and he hit the vehicle because he wasn't able to stop. That vehicle was then pushed into oncoming traffic and hit, to a large degree, head-on by a Hummer, probably going at the speed limit, which was fairly fast. And so it looked like Mr. Jenner was going the speed limit when he was driving behind the vehicle that he rear-ended, hit the brakes, so that would have slowed the vehicle down some, but he was still probably going relatively fast. And when you look at the damage to the back of the vehicle, that seems to be supported, or seems to support the idea that Mr. Jenner's vehicle was still moving at a pretty high rate of speed when it rear-ended it. It pushed that vehicle into oncoming traffic, where it got slammed into, to a large degree, and head-on by this Hummer, and the driver of that white Lexus died from the injuries from the accident. And so that's really, those are the basic facts from the accident. Now, there seems to be some confusion about a Toyota Prius that was in front of the white Lexus. Because, again, as the police come out and they investigate, their goal is to figure out, if they can, who's at fault for the accident. I think certainly Mr. Jenner has some fault. That's the way it's going to shake out, because he rear-ended the vehicle. Regardless of how it happened, because he rear-ended the vehicle, I think he's going to have some fault. There apparently was a Toyota Prius in front of the white vehicle who said, well, they came to a stop in the road because traffic was backed up from the stoplight. And so, traffic was backed up. There was a lot of traffic. They hit their brakes pretty quickly to stop. And they didn't do anything wrong, is their position. From what I've read, it sounds like the police question that. And they believe that maybe what was going on was traffic was not backed up, that actually the Prius stopped in the middle of the road in order to make an illegal U-turn. And that's sort of what started this chain of events. And so that's what they're trying to figure out. They're trying to find witnesses who saw the whole thing to quite honestly ask them, was traffic backed up from the light? And that's what required the Prius to stop, or was there no backed up traffic and the Prius just stopped for some reason, possibly to make a U-turn? And so that hasn't been clarified yet. If the Prius was just stopped because traffic was backed up, so the driver of the Prius just slowed down and stopped, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what you're supposed to do. If he doesn't slow down and stop, that driver is going to rear end the vehicle in front of him, right? If the driver of the Prius simply said, hey, look, I forgot something at home and I need to make a U-turn, and instead of doing it in a safe way, which would be to get up to the light, get into the turn lane, make a turn, let's say onto a side street, and then make a safe U-turn, that would be the safe way to do it. If instead of doing that, the driver of the Prius said, hey, I'm on the Pacific Coast Highway, and it's a major thoroughfare and everybody's driving really fast, but I want to turn around and go back the other direction, and they simply turned their blinker on, or maybe they didn't, and stopped, and was waiting for traffic to kind of clear coming the opposite direction so they could make a U-turn, and the traffic behind them, wasn't prepared for that, and suddenly everybody's slamming on their brakes and running into each other, then that driver has a lot of fault for the accident, probably the majority of fault, or at least half the fault, 50%, for the accident itself. And again, by violating the law and making an illegal U-turn, they, and apparently in California, could find themselves being charged with potentially a misdemeanor negligent homicide charge, in addition to the civil traffic violations and things like that. The next thing that's kind of come out of it is, based off of what I've read, there was some questions about whether or not Bruce Jenner was texting or doing something on his phone at the time of the accident, which again would have prevented him from, quickly knowing what was going on and being able to deal with the situation. Now, that's what initially came out. And so the police started the process of getting subpoenas in order to subpoena his phone records from the phone company. I think they're doing it maybe with all the other drivers just as part of their investigation. But so keep in mind, if you're messing with your phone, if you're on a phone call, if you're texting and you become involved in an accident, the police can actually go and should go and get that information, and you could potentially find yourself charged with a crime. There was a case like that actually in Arizona a few years ago where a truck driver ran into, I believe, some DPS officers who were on the side of the road dealing with, I think, another accident. And he was messing around with his phone, and he was messing around on the internet on his phone, wasn't paying attention, didn't even see him, and slammed into the back of all the parked cars on the side of the highway and killed, I believe, a DPS officer. And eventually he was charged, meaning the driver of that truck, with vehicular homicide, which was a felony, because he was so reckless in his actions. So, if you're being reckless and that's what causes the accident or contributes to it, and somebody gets severely injured or is killed, you can be charged with a crime, in every state as far as I know. It's important when you drive to focus on what you're doing and not text, not mess around on the internet, on your phone, not check your email. And it's become so easy to do these days because smartphones are such wonderful devices, and people have trouble just putting them away while they drive. And so it's very, very important that you pay attention. It's very, very important that you keep a safe distance between you and the driver in front of you, and you keep your speed at a speed where if something happens in front of you, whatever it may be, you're going to have the ability to hit your brakes and stop without running into somebody or something. It's very important that you don't mess with your phone. Or that you don't get distracted with the radio or anything else while you're driving. Because when it all shakes out, even if you're involved in one of these horrific accidents, and it's just an accident and you don't get charged with something criminally, if you're responsible for somebody being killed or severely injured, that in and of itself is a horrible experience to go through, to have, and to a horrible burden to have to live with, quite honestly, I think, for most people. To know that, because you weren't paying attention, you've now changed somebody else's life forever. And remember, that somebody's life could just as easily be yours if you're not paying attention and you get into an accident. And so, drive safe. Be aware of everything that's going on around you and pay attention. And get yourself home safely. Make sure you're not responsible for someone else not getting home safely. And so I thought, given that accident and as high profile as it has been, this would be a worthwhile topic to have a discussion about. Certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at dzanes, Z-A-N-E-S, at zaneslaw.com, and I'm happy to respond to those questions. And have a great week. Can't wait to talk to you next week.